Everyone, very welcome. It's great to have all of you here on our fifth webinar series. We used to have these informal talks at SEP for the B.UD students, which was conducted as a more of an informal engagement between a professional and the students, where students had the opportunity of having a face-to-face interaction and asking their questions and knowing more about what is happening in the field, what are the kinds of work that are happening, and what are the different trajectories also that if they want to explore, they can explore. Where are all these different trajectories would be happening, what are the difficulties, and what are the different dimensions of the work that they don't see when they are studying a case or where they are seeing a work on a website or on a magazine or a journal. So they get the understanding of the in and out of the kind of works that was happening. And Rahul and Matias, this has been very helpful, I think, for our students to basically decide what they want to do later afterwards, where if they want to do further studies, if they want to work, where they want to do their internship, where they want to do their placement, and what are the different options. Having in mind the fact that bachelor urban design at a bachelor level is the first time that is being offered from a university in India. It has helped a lot shaping the vision and the larger perspective for the students. So thank you very much, both of you, for sparing us the time and spending some time with us. The way we usually conduct is that at the end we leave the students open, leave the basically conversations open. Vidisha would be basically anchoring and monitoring. So she would basically read the questions and then try to put them together in a way that it saves more of time and covers more of the questions. And then in case somebody wants to have, like a personally ask of you, then we also allow them to open their mic and ask those questions. Vidisha, please, over to you.
Thank you, Mehnaz. Hello, everyone. My name is Vidisha, and I'm a final year student at Bachelor's of Urban Design course in SEPT University. And as a former intern at.Urbz, I would take this opportunity to introduce Rahul and Matias to you all today. Well, if I go by the definition, then I think URBZ is an experimental action and research collective specialized in participatory planning, based in Dharavi, Bogota, São Paulo, Geneva, and Seoul. And they have been working hands-on in such socially and politically challenging contexts for about 10 years now, 11 years now, resulting in an approach significant in the urban realm today. They believe that residents are experts of their neighborhood and their everyday experience constitute an essential knowledge for architecture, urban planning, urban development, and policy. However, this value and this approach is not only limited to, the site or their practice, but it was very much reflected in the office too. As an intern, our learning was not limited to drawings or renderings, but we actively engaged in every step of the project, from site documentation, client meetings, and not to forget the discussions and debates on design iterations itself. Our opinions mattered, and hence we owned every project we participated in, which I think reflects what URBZ truly believes in, participation in true sense. And one of the dilemmas throughout for me as an intern in Dharavi was questioning our role as urban designers, a very fundamental question indeed. There were days I felt very strongly about a certain element in design, but no matter how sustainable or well-intentioned, according to me, that approach was, it did not always align with the needs and aspirations of the people living there. And I think that's what made me realize, and that was a very crucial learning for me, which is to be able to gauge the needs and aspiration of the people we're designing for. And I know it sounds super obvious, public participation in urban design is so fundamental, but it's not that straightforward, because I think personally, in some way or form, it requires you to unlearn certain ideals that, we have been inspired by. Sometimes we don't even know about it. And I think hence it becomes important to know how much we as designers who supposedly know better need to push, and at the same time respect and examine the knowledge that people who have been spending their lives in a particular neighborhood have to bring on board to you. So I think that my entire experience with Urbz was very, very enriching. And not to forget our lunchtime political debates and all that food that Matthias and Rahul used to get to us. I think I've enjoyed my time at Urbz. And on that note, I present you Rahul Srivastava and Matias Echanove and their talk, Learning From. Over to you, Rahul and Matias.
Thank you so much, Vidisha. That is a very, very generous introduction. And I don't think we could have, hoped for a better way of being described, but particularly in the student community. So thank you. And yeah, I mean, you've already introduced us. And Matthias, are you on mute? I think you're still on mute, Matthias.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Vidisha. And yeah, I think it's nice memories of the lunchtime together. I think this is really what we miss the most now that everybody is kind of spread apart away. I mean, it's very nice in a way, because the kind of distance that we often have in the team, because we're very mobile, we work in different places. Rahul being in between Goa and Mumbai, myself in between Geneva and Mumbai, and then now we have a big project in Kochi, so part of the team is over there. And now it's very strange, because we found ourselves very, very far away and very close to each other, because we are at the same distance. It doesn't matter if you're in Mumbai or you're in Geneva. When we work on projects, we're all on remote. But of course, we really miss this quality of the interaction, and obviously being in context, being in situ, being in relationship with others is so central to our work that we also suffer from this a lot, and we can't wait for this huge like health crisis to be over, to start resuming conversations live and explorations of sites. And yeah, I mean, maybe should we just, like, without further ado, start? We've basically prepared a little presentation, a few slides, but not too many. So we kept as much time as possible for discussion. So and I feel also, Rahul, in case there is anybody who wants to ask a question while we're speaking, it's fine, you can.
Yeah, absolutely, it's perfectly fine.
Okay.
I think the moderator will be responding, because they will raise their hands, and the moderator, I think Vidisha, will be able to see the question, right? And then
yes, Rahul.
Something like that. Yeah. So, Matis, you have to share. You can share the screen, no?
Yeah. So I'll share right now. Are you all seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Yes, Matthias.
Yeah, we can see it here.
So maybe I'll just start, and then Rahul, you jump in.
Yeah,
We always do. We always actually with Rahul, we always have great intense conversations together. So so we're just thinking that we'll just keep this format and basically bounce out of each other's, but also keeping slides is always useful for basically keeping a certain structure. Otherwise, we may well kind of go on and diverge into many different directions. So the title of the presentation was learning from many things, and we'll explain why we thought this title was relevant. It's both relevant in terms of methodology and in terms of context. So we'll show different contexts and how the methodology that we apply in different contexts is can actually function in different contexts. And then we added doing with, because ultimately our practice is really about doing things with people. So so yeah, we those two dimensions come together. Okay, so maybe first, maybe I'll let you, maybe Rahul, talk about this, but it's this really how herbs on our approach, which we call urbanology, came together.
So essentially, both Matias and me come from backgrounds which are not architectural, but they work. I mean, we work very closely with architects. My own training has been, I studied urban anthropology. Matias has, has been involved with urban planning practices for a very long time. Formally, also he studied urban planning. But our approach within the context of anthropology and urban planning has not been mainstream. So, for example, when for me, anthropology has been an approach in which the idea of listening to people, listening to students. When I'm teaching anthropology, when I was teaching anthropology, this becomes the starting point of the interaction. Similarly, when Matias was doing his work in Tokyo, you can see a photograph of a workshop he had organized in Shimokuzawa in Japan, in a neighborhood called Shimokuzawa in Tokyo. He was also involved in the street politics, and he was also working with the various activists in the neighborhood for protecting it from a major development plan. On the left, what you see is a small video clip, which is from a film which my students had made in Wilson College called Aur Irani Chai, about Irani cafes owned by Wilson College students. And the idea was to bring the neighborhood into the classroom. So we come from spaces which are slightly off-center in terms of our own practice, and herbs became a platform where both our off-center became center. So herbs is a place where, from whichever background we came from, we began to actually consolidate into a practice. And from the realm of only activism or only teaching, we became a place which had our own rules. And a lot of what Vidisha has already so nicely explained is something very firm for us. We believe in evolving a practice which in many ways is predicated on a people-centered approach.
Yeah, and those things now seem to be maybe fairly obvious. Whether it is about a certain approach to anthropology, which brings the user at the center and starts kind of understanding, looking at the relative from the user's perspective, and going as close as possible from local knowledge as you can. And also in urban planning, to kind of go from a classic top-down approach to an approach which is about working with the inhabitants and coming up with a plan that is grounded on the local realities. This was things that were already obvious back then, but there was very little practice. And what happened in the kind of 10 years of practice that we've done since we started in Mumbai is that we kind of consolidated the practice. We developed a few insights, a few concepts that have been really useful for us now, and that we would like to share with you today. So maybe first the learning from. Learning from the users, learning from the context. This is always our starting point. It's a starting point from every project. This is really where we draw inspiration from. And doing with something which is fundamental to pretty much any urban space on Earth is the inherent diversity of the population, of the ecosystem that composes it. So diversity becomes really something that we need to compose with, and it's a creative element within the project. And of course, local knowledge. So when we talk about local knowledge, it's not just knowledge in an abstract sense. It's also knowledge as practice, knowledge as skills. For example, we're always very interested in understanding who in the neighborhood can do what, We love working with artisans, local contractors. We think local practitioners are always interesting. And we kind of also find out that in pretty much every place you are, you always find really interesting expertise on different aspects of creating a neighborhood plan. You know, whether it's a lawyer, an engineer, you know, like those dimensions are always there. So yeah, this is maybe Rahul, I'll let you.
Yeah. Urbz was born in the neighborhood of Dharavi in Mumbai, in the sense that Urbz was really an office which began in very humbly in a small literally on the first floor of a tiny building. We had to climb through a ladder into it. Matias, I credit Matias very clearly with being able to recognize and to hear the language of Mumbai in a manner which I also, as a resident of many years, had not heard as carefully. So the idea of listening to what the city is saying is very important. You know, seeing people in the city with new eyes, not with the eyes of expectation, not with the eyes of prejudice. These are the starting points in a sense of Urbz. It would have been very difficult for someone like me to have simply accepted and understood the idea that, well, we must have an office over here, because theoretically I could understand many things, but in pragmatic terms, I did not have the skills and the confidence to do so. So it was wonderful when Matias and me began to dialogue with each other. We began to exchange notes. We began to share, how differently, we can actually create a method or a structure or a practice. That is how Urbz came into being. We began to organize workshops. We began to do conversations with local residents, and this idea that a lot of what our ideals were needed to be organized and structured in a manner which was innovative, which was different, which was new. This is really at the heart of it, because we felt that all of us are exposed to very radical ideas in college and universities. Right now we are very sure that except all of you are experimenting with great ideas. You come with lots of burning energy, but then finally, after graduation, you are often told that you have to now come to terms with reality. Now, what is this reality? Why is it not that your visions can also translate itself into a real context? And in many ways, for us, it was very important not to forget the enthusiasm and the excitement of new ideas and new ways of doing things, which are part of our learning process, and not to see that growing up means that you actually have to get into a mainstream. And that is why the Urbz office began in an innovative place, in a place based on convictions. And we feel it's very important to talk about this growth as well, the story of the office itself.
Yeah, and I also want to mention that just the same way Rahul was very nice in creating me for this kind of interest and the kind of the drive to actually engage with a neighborhood like Dharavi initially. Actually, it would have been impossible, obviously, for me to do it without Rahul, and it's really in the relationship that we've built the approach. And I think this is always also something which is methodologically important in our projects, is that it's not just about gathering knowledge from the neighborhood, and it's really about working with local actors, and this implies creating a relationship. And the relationship, specifically when it's a relationship you develop with people who are very different from you. Culturally, they come from they basically different, come from different social worldviews, social structures. Typically, I mean, this is something which is very present in every city, in Mumbai, just as any other. But this idea that a neighborhood also corresponds to a certain category of people, a certain caste, a social background. How do you overcome this? How do you not become either just fully the other, or fully local, but keep this kind of like alterity, which is a source of a lot of creativity. And I think this working in tandem was very important, and then enlarging the collective with people who also are very diverse. So our collective is made of people who come from all kinds of background, and we love this. You know, this is really what gives us the strength. The strength of our group is in its diversity. It's what allows us to navigate very, very different kind of spaces. So maybe first we'll just show you a series of I think 3 or 4 concepts that have become anchors in our methodology. The first one is the idea of recognition, recognizing the existing, recognizing what is there. This is really for us central. You have to come, and this is where I think we depart from kind of standard classic approach to urban planning, urban design, and architecture, which you have to start from the blank slate, the tabula rasa, you know, in order to do something creative. For us, the creative material is the existing. Whatever is there before is what we want to work with. This is what excites us. This is what stimulates us. So we draw inspirations, ideas, and relationship. We create relationship with the locality. On the left is an elderly gentleman in a site in Geneva, who is also an inventor. He told us about many of his inventions, and we have to create a plan, neighborhood plan, which is going to be in the place of his house now. So we thought that would be amazing to also draw from that history and have a fab lab, construction, a kind of a place for bricolage, for creating things, for a maker space. You know, that would also be kind of a nice reference to his to his ethos of being a creator and a maker. Yeah. On the left is Ataiji, a local constructor, a local builder in Paraísopolis in São Paulo, that also became a very good friend. He started along with another couple of architect friends, Urbz in São Paulo. He came to Mumbai, and he's someone who's just, you know, learned construction by doing, and he's built, you know, over 100 houses in his life. He's got great knowledge. So this is typically the kind of relationship that we love to build and draw upon for our projects. And
the next slide now.
Yeah, maybe Rahul, I'll let you on.
Okay, so you know, along with recognition, which is very important, because we often find that the world of ordinary life, everyday life, is something which is given to us as raw material that we must transform. But it became very important for us to not think only in those terms, but to think about what already exists and taking that as a starting point. So recognition is often followed by the idea that we need to bring in a certain process, and that process is one of working with local residents, listening to them, looking at what they are already doing, and then once you unleash the process, then you start understanding that this process is not something which is amorphous or without a structure or without form. There is a form, and the form is something which you must allow to unfold rather than something which you must impose from the top. So the idea that the moment certain processes are put into place, that these processes will allow for emergence of different kinds of you know, practices. So for example, one very simple idea which you know, we often talk about is the fact that, well, certain neighborhoods are called informal, as if there is no, you know, that they are somehow outside the space of formality. And we have always believed that, no, the more we have worked with the logic of those spaces, we have only found that they have their own forms and their own structure. But we have to learn to recognize. So recognition and understanding that form follows process are 2 points which go complementary. Marcus, you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, maybe I'll just go to the next point, the tool house. That's also something that we keep on using. That's become a very important typology for us to recognize the fact that people use space in productive ways. So the house is also a space of production, which of course can be economic production, as in the case of Dharavi and many parts of India, many parts of the world, where the house doubles up as a shop or as a little workshop, but also a space of cultural production. It's a space which basically is much more than a place to sleep, much more than a residential place. it's a place which actually contributes not just to the life of the family, but to the life of the neighborhood in very significant way. And on the right is a project that we'll talk about later on, where we actually activate also a house as a tool for planning the neighborhood. And yeah, maybe we'll just start with also saying that, you know, one thing that we've also learned in the journey of working in different neighborhoods, of course in Dharavi, obviously, because this is a place where we still have our office after 10 years. And it's always been a big source of inspiration, but we realized that the typology that is often kind of decried as being a typology of a slum, of an informal typology, is actually a quite universal typology. And this typology is the typology of the incremental, what we call the homegrown. And we can find it everywhere around the world. So in this specific image, we show actually Dharavi merged together with Tokyo. So this is a collage of two cities. And what we're trying to say here is that there is nothing intrinsically wrong with the low-rise, high-density, mixed-use kind of fabric that we see in so many Indian cities, in so many cities around the world, which is often just denigrated as being slummy. We're saying that actually no, this can be the starting point for you know, very modern, very interesting, very integrated kind of neighborhoods. So this is what we're trying to show in a few of those collages. And so before was Tokyo and Mumbai. Here's an urban village in Shenzhen, China, and Dharavi. So Dharavi is kind of on the front, and then everything behind is Shenzhen. So there's about in Shenzhen, which is kind of like the mecca of technological innovation in China. There's about 8 million people who live in urban villages, which are also incremental, which are also mixed use, and also dense. So we think that, you know, they actually hold a lot of creative potential if only we start looking at them differently. And this is also another collage of Dharavi on the left and São Paulo, Paraísopolis on the right. This is part of, again, you know, the wires go from one city to the other. We feel this kind of universal homegrown typology is something which is really worth paying attention to. And this is part of an exchange that we did with the neighborhood of Paraísopolis, which is considered to be one of the largest favela in Sao Paulo. This is the original photo. And if you look at this photo, what is happening is that we did an exhibition of photos of Dharavi in this neighborhood, and we started a conversation between the two neighborhoods. So on the left, you see a photo of a little girl, which is on the wall. And this is part of the exhibition. Here you see on the left, someone from Paraísopolis who is nailing on the wall a photo of actually Bendup in Mumbai. So just trying to kind of like have this conversation about the fact that, you know, this typology, which is so often stigmatized, is something which is, you know, a kind of norm around the world, should be recognized as so, and should be seen as a starting point for improvement, and not some kind of dead end.
So on the right, we see the elderly man you see over there. He's Bhau Korde, Ramchandra Korde, who's from Dharavi. He's a resident for 88 years. And when we were invited to go to Brazil to do this workshop in Paraísopolis on Dharavi, he came along with us. And for him, it was a very, very special experience because he loved Paraísopolis. The favela over there for him was what Dharavi should aspire to become. And for him, the social life, the community life, the way in which you know, people were also involved in keeping the neighborhood clean, and they kept improving on it. These are something which he recognized at once. So if you see the whole narrative which we have so far, we talk about recognition, we talk about form following process, we talk about the idea of they're radical incremental. And we essentially are saying that if you listen to how the city speaks and unfolds, if you listen to how people themselves take the initiative in creating spaces, often against a lot of odds, there's a lot we can learn from that agency. And instead of trying to work against it or work with abstractions or with all kinds of prejudiced expectations, if we start working with that energy, we find that there's a lot of much more there's a lot more natural diversity, first of all, of forms. Different kinds of cities can emerge, different kinds of ways of living can find a space for themselves. And this is something which we feel has given us confidence to do a lot more projects which are based on the idea of learning. So for example, Matias, you want to?
No, I mean, so we'll also give you a few examples of projects we are doing. We're just selecting a few. In fact, we just want to focus specifically on participation because we want to kind of talk about this idea of learning from, which is really about also learning from the context and doing something with it, and of course involving the residents. And this is a project that we're really happy to be involved with in Kochi, where we've been invited by the municipality of Kochi, along with GIZ, which is the German development agency, to first of all do an assessment through participatory process of the situation, the challenges that the citizens are confronted with in Kochi, and then on that basis create a brief for a design competition, and the design competition is ongoing now. We have a lot of participants, and we just want to tell you a little bit about about this process.
So essentially, one of the things which we did was we organized workshops and interactions with local residents in different neighborhoods. We talked to students who are part of the stretch where we are working on. We asked local residents to take us on walks and explore neighborhoods together. And this was something which, which for us was very natural and spontaneous, but it did yield a lot of more interesting insights about the neighborhood. It helped us to shape some aspects of the competition in ways which would not have happened if we had not followed this process.
And over here in the center also you see Samida Patil, who's part of our team, who's been really involved in this project, and along with Karina, Radha, and others from our team. It's so nice that in fact some of those projects are really kind of being run by them on site now or virtually, and it's a really nice feeling. I just want to say also, so one very basic thing about the process that we did, this is now part of the methodology that we apply in many of our participatory processes, is that we basically had a lot of conversations with many different people, and then we just wrote notes. They could write notes, we could write notes on small pieces of paper, and we have like a color code. We kind of capture people's emotions and feelings in pink or red. We capture people's ideas in yellow. We capture people's knowledge in blue. Their questions come in white, and in green some quality that they observe in the context. And then like you see, we had to kind of process. Actually, it's even much more than that. This is just a small selection of everything that we have collected, and that we then organize into big thematics, and that becomes kind of like the basis of a design brief that can then be open to the creative inputs of architects and designers that really kind of get inspired by something which is rooted in the local reality. And then, of course, doing this, we avoid what often happens in design competition, is that the architects don't have the time, or the planners don't have the time to actually understand what is the context and who are the people for whom they are supposed to be designed. designing. So yeah, this is just a glimpse into it. And then maybe quickly also we'll present one project from Geneva, which is, and we'll try to show you also how some of the concepts that we've highlighted in the first part of the presentation are also used in such a in a very radically different context. So same concept but different context. So this is a neighborhood plan. So the triangle that you see here is about 8,000 square meter. And we were asked to do a plan for this neighborhood. So you should have new buildings coming instead of the houses because there's a need for densification. And there was a previous plan which was rejected very heavily by the population in the form of a referendum. So when we came in, we proposed an approach which was really radically participative. So for the first few months, we're not designing anything, we're just talking to people. And a few of the things that I'm just making it very short, so we can keep some time for the conversation. But a few of the things that we've kind of been bringing in. First of all, the idea of the tool house, as explained before, the house became, which was on site, became a tool for the participation because it was a very convivial, very nice place that people could kind of come into and interact. So basically, the neighbors also met in the process of planning the future neighborhood. It was really nice to have those interactions with all the people who lived around, and we understood that they were not against development per se, but they were against a certain type of development. And then on site, we also proposed the tool house typology, a live-work typology, recognizing the fact that this is something which is really now everywhere in the world becoming very important. The ability of being able to work from home. And obviously, in these COVID times, we're very well placed to understand how important it is to be able to work also from home and to leverage the house as a productive space. The idea of recognition, so through interactions with the neighbors. Here we see Rahul. We've done a big workshop. And when we do workshops, we invite people from all over the world to interact with neighbors. So the principle of diversity also was very much part of this approach. It was very nice to see this Swiss neighborhood with a lot of Indian architects. Because we have a lot. Our network, our base is over there in India. So. Many people came from all over the place, not just from India, but also from Korea, from Bogota, and interacting with the locals, bringing ideas, very empathetic to the context and to the way people were living, but at the same time, that were truly innovative with this kind of gaze that comes when you come from elsewhere. And last thing I want to mention in this process, which was very interesting in the way it unfolded, is that this concept of form follows process. We invited the Museum of Swiss Architecture to select very innovative Swiss architects to come and start working on different aspects of the plan once the program was done. So we really did first the program. We decided, what should happen and how the neighborhood should function. And then we asked them to come and give expression to this program. And the way they worked, instead of like each starting working on one building, they started working on the open space from the user point of view and the facades of the buildings. So we are now, and it's still ongoing, moving towards an urban design, which is basically a composition of where the buildings are actually designed by more than one architect, which is really rare. In fact, doesn't really happen. It's not common practice, but this really came out of the process. It's not something that we imposed, but when we brought those architects together, we told them how, the whole plan came about through a participatory process. They decided that they would also work in a participatory way. So even where we thought participation was going to be very difficult in the realm of design, we found out that actually it also like could happen. And I think maybe Rahul, I'll let you conclude on that.
Yes, yes.
And we can
So
go.
essentially, what we wanted to simply emphasize in this particular, we have not been able to show. We didn't want to show a lot of our other projects and works where we have accumulated a lot of material over the last decade, as you can imagine. But our idea was really to focus on the idea of listening and listening and doing with. This is very important because, in a sense, if you don't learn from the context, if you don't listen to residents, you don't listen to your clients, if you don't listen very carefully to what people are saying, then the learning won't happen. And learning from context is one way which we must institutionalize into our practice. And the more you institutionalize that, the more you will realize that your practices themselves become not only enriched, but they also start producing real solutions. So we are not in any way living in a world of the abstract. We're not living in the world of the ideal or the concrete, but we are we are dealing with the world of the concrete. We are dealing with the world of what is possible in the here and now. So I think this approach has been very important for us, and participation is something which has to come spontaneously, naturally. It is not an ethic which has to be imposed. We believe it has to be institutionalized in the practice itself. And if you do this, then you will find that both your practice as well as what you're working on, both of them start to unfold in a manner which is full of surprises. There are new ways of doing things, new models which emerge. The stress on on only the expert or the technocrat is much less. This is something shared by everybody, including those people who are supposedly the recipients of somebody else's designs and solutions. So we would just like to end over here and perhaps continue more with questions from you guys, from all of you. And yes, Vidisha, over to you.
Yes, thank you for your presentation, Rahul and Matias. The floor is open for discussion. I think it takes a minute or so for people to type in their questions usually. Yes. So ask away, guys.
Until students and our participants get ready, I have a question, Matias and Rahul. I'm wondering, in almost in all of these cases, there is a initial stage of an interaction with the community. How do you usually plan that? Is it planned? Is it organically in terms of time and stage, is it organically happening that you decide, okay, this is a stage where we want to have a close interaction? And how do you usually keep those sessions? Some people on the site you coordinate with, or how does it usually happen?
Matias, should I? Or?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so it's see, for us, very importantly, locating ourselves in the context that we are working with has become very important. So even when we are doing, our biggest learning takes place in Dharavi because that's where our office is. But we have done projects everywhere. So whether it's in Geneva, also when we did this project in Versua, the house which was at the center of the neighborhood became the space where all the interactions began to happen. So one of our strategy is that we immerse ourselves in the particular context that we are supposed to be working. The community and the neighborhood gravitate towards us because we bring in all that energy. And it is through this process that the conversations and the interactions actually start. So the community works, the interaction with the community is through direct proximity, working closely with, often in the neighborhood itself where we are working. So that is a very important strategy from our point of view.
Maybe I'll just add to this that, I think that if you really think about establishing a relationship, this is where it's at, so basically the fact that you come back, that you are there, that it's not just a one-off discussion, where you just get what you need and then you go and do your plan. people see you again and again, so they start trusting that, oh, actually you are really interested in the neighborhood, you are really interested in what we're going to tell you, and this is really how you can start working with and doing something with them, and they feel that it's not just something that you come and collect to do something on your side, in your office.
We seem to have got a few questions now also.
Yes, Rahul. So the first one is regarding the COVID situation currently. And the question is about what do you think, how urban design, the role that urban design has in, in this situation currently. And also we have been seeing a lot of, reporting from URB's end, situation in Dharavi in particular. So what has URB's role been in COVID and the situation in Dharavi particularly?
Matias, you want to just?
I'll let you start.
Okay, so this is a very, very big topic, about the whole idea of urban design and the tackling of the pandemic itself, because there are many issues involved. But for us, what is important is that what the pandemic has taught us is that the locality or the neighborhood, which is which is where most of us find ourselves now, sort of sometimes locked in, and sometimes just part. This is the world now for many of us. And this world of locality actually is something which has a lot of inner resources, and how to make it more resilient is something which we felt has always been part of our concerns. When we worked in Dharavi, we were talking about the local resilience which already exists there. And it is very interesting that through our interactions with Dharavi, we found that local organization, local leadership played a very important role, which everybody is acknowledging now. If it was not for the local leadership and the local organization of the neighborhood, then many attempts at controlling the situation would not have been possible. So what we have often talked about is the fact that local resilience is important. It came into the fore during the pandemic in the neighborhood like Dharavi. Through our own conversations, we could even long distance keep up the momentum of the Dharavi newsletter, because we had deep networks and we could talk to people, they trusted us, so on and so forth. And the lesson we can learn is precisely this, that how do we have more local resilience? How can urban design and urban planning move towards creating greater element of strengthening the inner institutional structures of localities better?
Yeah, I think also one thing that we definitely learned is that we cannot reduce everything to a spatial dimension. So there's only so much that urban design can do. And urban design can do a lot, but we have to understand that we're not saying that, first of all, I mean, of course, the community response is something that goes way beyond the design. You need, of course, to do things which allow community interactions to keep on happening and taking place, of course. So the design should not be something that obstructs this kind of direct interventions and participation on community feelings. But also, we felt that learning from what happened in not just in Dharavi, all over India, when there was suddenly a lockdown announced and people had 4 hours to basically just go back wherever they were and stay locked in for months. The crisis that was created is really a crisis of density, which used to be mitigated by the ability of being mobile. In very dense neighborhoods, the fact that you knew that if anything becomes unbearable or the situation becomes difficult, you can always take a train and leave back to the village, back somewhere else, was essential. And when suddenly the only thing you are left with is purely that space with its limitations, it became not enough. So a space is never a finite kind of thing. It's something which always needs to be extended into social networks, into infrastructure of mobility, and we need always to think about space in that type of relational manner.
Right. So we have this another question that talks about, that in public participation, there are different stakeholders. And, I mean, conflict of opinion is inevitable. So is it possible to make everyone happy? And how do you deal with a situation like that?
there is a certain expectation that everybody should be happy, and there is a certain expectation that communities are very happy places. But the fact is that it is not true. We all know that even in a family where we are all supposed to love each other and live together, there are differences. So the fact is that these differences are what make community. These differences are what make neighborhood life, and that is why there is no resolution as such. There is no moment where everybody now moves towards a utopia of brotherhood. So this is something which we need to also understand, that that this is a endemic process of living, that and you'll find it everywhere. Nobody can create a community or a neighborhood where everybody is happy. So the whole notion is, how does one deal with the differences? How does one acknowledge differences which do exist? How does one find ways of managing conflict and differences? And this has actually been part of our learning, that it is not that, and once people realize that there is a certain common ground in terms of accepting and acknowledging this, then there are ways in which things do get resolved. Sometimes some things don't get resolved, but the process remains important. It's not enough to simply reject the process because we feel that we're not making everybody happy. So this is something which is very important. Matias, you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to add very quickly something about, yes, of course, there'll always be conflict. And I think the role of participation is to identify those points of conflict. We need to start with this. In fact, it's only when you identify these points of conflict that you can start having a very interesting creative work around them, a creative resolution. So it's not about creating, a perfect place. It's about creating a place which can, in its response, to respond to conflicts in creative ways. And so typically, I mean, if you talk about the conflict between the need to have a high density and the fear that people may have of it, how do you resolve it? In the project I presented just before in Geneva, one of the resolutions was to say that we want to work around the principle, which is that we're going to have density, but no immensity. That we can create density because it can bring quality also. It can bring this urban quality, this interactivity, this interaction that we want. But we don't want immense buildings. We don't want to have something which is overpowering the individual, overpowering the potential for community to kind of gather and create a sense of identity around the place. So yeah, in terms of process, actually look for the conflicts rather than what makes everybody happy. Identify those zones of conflicts, even if it's a tiny minority, which has a very, very important issue with something that may be unfolding, and then allow for a creative process to resolve those conflicts.
Right. Our next question is actually a little interesting. It's actually very interesting. So what are the challenges that you first faced in Dharavi when you had to make a conversation with people? And how did you overcome those challenges, if there were any?
Matias, you should.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, I mean, it's, see, I mean, there's always issues of communication, whether it's language or whether it's different worldviews that you have to be confronted with. But this is so kind of like so much a starting point for us, to acknowledge that, yes, this is going to be something that we're going to have to overcome in different ways, that, they don't present themselves as a challenge. I mean, this is the work itself, I don't know. I just feel, for us, it was mostly not about it. We didn't force relationship. We didn't force, kind of. In fact, there was, and this is often like this. We find that people are really quite happy to be talking, quite happy to be engaged with something. There's actually, if you work mostly on the positive kind of impulse that people have to actually interact. And the curiosity that they may have and the curiosity that you have, and then, you know, you combine this, it creates something quite nice, you know. So working with this, you know, rather than, you know, thinking as a, let's say, you know, I have a formal approach, like as if you're maybe a government worker or social worker, saying that, you know, what can I do to help you, you know, and have a survey, you know, like we basically just start a conversation, which can be around the chai, which can be just around, you know, things that we all share, which is informal, which is pleasant, and from there you build something which can evolve into, let's say, a work relationship. Someone says, oh, you know, you've been around so much and I've seen you, you know, can you help me with the design of my house? This is how many of our projects have happened, you know, just through this relationship.
This is really very an important point, and it is, you know, we managed to do a lot of this also because we were also reflecting and questioning and critically analyzing sometimes our own ways of interacting. You know, it was not something which happened spontaneously. There was a trial and error. We had to learn. Some of us, you know, initially when we were walking down the streets, and then we realized that, you know, what is important, and we learn from each other. So that is how, you know, I mean, the whole process initially, that's what you're asking, started also. That you know, that to treat everybody equally is not very easy. I'm sure, you know, we know as teachers, as students, that, you know, as somebody else has asked a very interesting question, that how in an academic environment, it is very difficult to bring up participatory process. You know, of course it is very difficult, because the fact is that academic, you know, structures are often hierarchical. But even social structures are hierarchical. So we may go into a place, into a neighborhood, thinking that we are superior in some way or the other. And that superiority is reflected in our questions, our conversations. And if you find somebody else treating people genuinely as equal, you will find a totally different set of responses over there. Now, it is, you know, and in many contexts, you find that if we believe in hierarchy and we believe in positioning and status and differences, and if we very seriously believe in, you know, in expert knowledge and experts and technocrats who actually have superior knowledge, then we will never end up having the right relationship. But if we genuinely go with an egalitarian mindset, and we have to work towards it, because, you know, many of us come from backgrounds where egalitarianism is not part of our conditioning. You know, we in fact, we are more comfortable in dealing with people above us or below us, and not necessarily those who are equal. And this is something which this goes beyond simply a structure or a methodology of work. This is something which we need to reflect on anyway. So this is just also to respond to the question which I saw, you know, about how do you practice this in an academic environment, and that it is still important to engage and take students through this process. But what, you know, it's obviously difficult. And, you know, when I was teaching myself in Wilson College many years ago, 2 decades ago, it was a very interesting and, you know, sort of opportunity for me to introduce many of these ideals in the classroom, and it was difficult, very challenging. So, for example, we are all used to creating a performance around exams, and we are stressed about exams. So I used to often tell the students to please prepare their own question paper, and I would introduce the same question paper which they had formulated, and they were still very stressed because they didn't believe it, because they were so used to having you know, a distance between the process of learning, etc. So these are not easy things. Now we are making it sound very easy in the presentation, but they are not easy things. These are some things which we had to work on from different directions, and it was there were challenges and hindrances of different kinds. But a lot of it was not to do with the community; it was to do with us, you know, people in our team, and how it was very difficult for us to always share very, you know, the ethos of being equal and relating to people as equal. It doesn't come so easily. It is something which we also had to work on.
I just want to say, you know, one thing which I always loved in the neighborhood project that Rahul had done, and that I found very inspiring, is that he basically, you know, said as a teacher that, oh, you, my students, you have many things to teach me, because you know your context much better. So you know your neighborhood better, and that's the approach. That's the idea. It's like your neighborhood is your knowledge, and so therefore, you know, the whole class is going to learn from your knowledge. And this is really something that we systematically do. Like we come to places and we think that, you know, we want to learn. We want to learn from you guys. We want to, you are the resource, you know, So the positioning is is one of, let's say it's a humility, but it's also just, you know, very pragmatic. So, you know, like I'm not gonna, if I really want to do something interesting over here, I better, you know, understand the neighborhood and get that knowledge. And this knowledge is with the people, with the users.
And I think Matias has responded to Ramia's specific question, which was exactly on this topic. How has your experience of teaching education helped you? So Ramya, we hope that your question has been answered. And Vidisha, Srushti also asked a question. No, I think we missed her on.
Yes, Rahul. Actually, I was clubbing up questions, so I think we can take Srushti.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we have the sorry. There was a question about funding.
Yes, so that's Srushti's question. So she's asking that how are the funds managed in projects which are in such an informal setting?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, we are a very small firm and a very small organization. As Vidisha knows, that we have kept ourselves very small. We have kept our office in a very humble place, and and keeping costs low and allowing us to do and allowing a diverse set of skills to operate. So not all of us are only doing architectural projects. There's also research which goes on. There's also some element of university interactions, working with universities and students, and all of the revenues which come and keep the office going. But the trick is, if you're, you know, if you all are thinking in terms of future, is that please, you know, be innovative and very think out of the box when you're running your own firms and offices. Keep costs low. Try and manage with so that you can actually release a lot more energy to do projects which you really enjoy doing. So for Matias and me, it was very important to do projects in Dharavi because we were not doing it because we felt that there was a need over there. We felt that this is the most exciting place for us to learn from. This is a place where there's a lot of action happening. That was our interest. And for that, you know, we felt that this is also, of course, a very affordable place for us to work comparatively. So it was a happy coincidence. But that is really the way we felt that we can keep doing our projects which we like, which are not necessarily revenue generating in themselves, but by managing to allow for a diverse set of skills to raise revenue and then keep our costs low. So I hope this answers your question, Srushti.
Rahul, we have another question from Saloni. Saloni has recently done a studio which was based in Dharavi last semester. Okay. So she's asking that when we as designers think about redesigning housing of Dharavi, we imagine completely different organized spaces, you know, as the best solution for them. But do you think it's important to retain these closed, compact and complex spaces which, you know, are currently existing? Because in some way the complexity gives the community their unique interactions.
Matias, you want to? Matias, you want to respond to that?
Yes. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay. Actually, I was also gonna be looking for. See, like one thing that we've kind of realized, and we keep. Oh, sorry. That was like, it's I don't know if you heard it, but there's like a video for you guys. I just showed this video in the background while I'm talking because I think it's part of, maybe it helps answering the question. Okay, I'll show this. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just make it big. This is a little like 3D animation we made on the basis of designs that were provided to us. We did a project called The Design Comes As We Build. We realized that the local contractors in Dharavi, obviously they have a lot of knowledge, of construction based on practice. Many of them have built dozens, sometimes more than 100 houses each. So they have an amazing amount of experience, and they also have a very contextualized experience. So they understand what people actually need. And we also realized that they build without plan. They kind of just as artisans often do. They just okay, say, oh, this is kind of thing you need. Okay, understand. I've done something similar. Check this house. You know, do you want it this like this or like that? Should we put the door left or right? It's discussed orally, and then, you know, they just go and build it. So the design comes as we build. And so we decided to just sit down with the contractors. So all contractors from Dharavi, professional house builders. And we asked them, you know, if you could imagine the best possible house for Dharavi, given the context, you know, in a very small footprint, without destroying everything around, just, you know, on the existing footprint of houses over there, what would you do? And you know, that became like an exhibition of models, which have been traveling in different places. We've shown them at the B.UD Museum in Mumbai, but also in the Maxi Museum in Rome. And this is a 3D animation with those models. But, you know, for us, you know, the answer to this is really to think about the fact that the best possible way of taking on Dharavi in terms of development and most homegrown neighborhoods, most incremental neighborhood, is to continue doing what people have been doing for years, which is to improve incrementally rather than go tabula rasa. And you know, it's in fact, it's almost more complicated, but actually it's much more pragmatic. This is the way it has been done. And this is where we can really bring, I think, the most value as designers, because then we can engage. Once we understand how the local practice works, we can engage with it and maybe, you know, bring in here and there interesting value add in terms of, you know, design elements, materials, and things like this. But in no way we think that it'd be a good idea to kind of come destroy an entire street and, you know, build high-rise buildings, because you destroy the economic fabric, the social fabric, the cultural fabric, and the identity, you know, of a place which actually is loaded with very strong cultural identity.
Thank you, Matias. I think with this, we move to the last question for the evening, which is that over the span of 10 years, what has Rahul learned from Matias and what has Matias learned from Rahul?
Well, for me, it's very easy. I can easily answer the question. I mean, number one is that, you know, and I'm speaking not only about myself, but I'm speaking in a way which many of you guys will also understand, you know, because we all share a certain context that that it's not very easy for many of us to be brave and audacious in choices which we make. You know, we are in a society which is always telling us what to do. So you take, you know, very cautious moves. So what I learned a lot from Matias is the ability to be a little more brave and to be audacious, and which I do alone on my own. And especially in terms of even developing, I always wanted to be part of an institutional history where we would ourselves create an institution which was which made its own rules, which was not bureaucratic, which worked as a team genuinely, where we worked in a context where we could directly engage very creatively. You know, when I was doing the neighborhood project, it was really about how do I learn from the neighborhood through my students, and then it became a larger world outside the safe academic context of the college. And the outside larger world was very difficult for me to engage, and if it was not for Matias there, I would not have been able to do it. So I'm very happy and thankful for that.
And yeah, I don't even know where to begin, because I've learned so much from Rahul and our interactions and discussions, you know, and it's been a constant, you know, source of inspiration. I mean, when I met Rahul, he had just published a novel, and so he was always at the same time an anthropologist, an educator, but also a fiction writer, someone who thinks extremely creatively, and he, you know, effortlessly goes from one world to the other. And I think that was always very, very inspiring. And also at a more practical level, just to really see through things and start to understand, okay, how does a certain form come about, and, you know, what are the anthropological processes at work behind what we can observe, you know, at the very superficial level. And we understand that we may be in one of the most densely populated places on earth. We may be in a very dense urban environment, but really when you look at the roots and the social cultural roots of that place, you know, we go right back to rural ethos and rural practices. We go back to the village, and you know, those kinds of this kind of way of seeing through in depth has been, you know, hugely inspiring, and of course it challenged a lot of my you know, preconceptions and you know, superficial understanding of things. So yeah, that was. But more than anything, I just want to say also at the level of the relationship, what I've really learned is to trust the fact that when you actually work with someone for so many years that is also such a good friend and someone you fully trust, that you give out your best ideas, he gives out his best ideas, and something even better comes out in the process. And I know that is fundamentally been the most satisfying part of the relationship. You know, to see things that he could have done on his own, I could not have done it on my own, but together, you know, like it becomes something. And now, when it's multiplied by an entire team of people who, you know, have the same energy and motivation and creativity, and add to this, it becomes even more powerful and interesting.
Yes, of which Vidisha is very much a part of.
Of course.
Thank you so much, Rahul and Matias, for such an insightful presentation. I'm sure my batchmates have had a blast, and I'm sure they've got to learn a lot. This was, you know, the much requested informal talks, and everyone was looking forward to it. So thank you so much for joining us today. And that too, I think the notice was also quite short. So thank you so much for joining us today. Mehnaz?
Thank you so much, both of you. I think it was amazing basically hearing the inside stories and all the difficulties mostly that you have gone through. And I mean, there are still some questions that Vidisha haven't managed to get to respond to. So I'm sure the students have been very excited. Thank you so much for both of you. And we do really look forward to seeing more of you and then see what are the other opportunities that we can get to interact more with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon with another speaker in the coming Fridays. See you all. Stay safe. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.